Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Tonight, let's explore some of the most joyous days in American military history. These days would signify the end of the bloodiest and most catastrophic conflict in world history, World War II. Let's travel roughly 75 years back to 1945 to Victory in Europe Day and Victory in Japan Day. Since 1939, the world had been entangled in a bitter struggle between two chief alliances, the Allied powers and the Axis powers. Millions of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and civilians had lost their lives in the worldwide struggle between democracy and dictatorship, a classic historical showdown of good and evil. After a ferocious start from the Axis, the Allies took command in the last several years of the war. By early 1945, the Axis powers in Europe had all but collapsed. With the USSR closing in on Germany in the east and the United States and Great Britain penetrating Western Europe, the fascist powers that had once strangled the European landmass began to fall. The decisive moment was the double suicide of Adolf Hitler and his wife, Eva Braun, whom he married the day before. On April 30th, 1945, nearly 60 feet underground in a bunker underneath his Berlin headquarters, the German dictator and his wife each swallowed a cyanide capsule. Just over a week later, the German forces surrendered in cities across Europe. And on May 8, 1945, the free world rejoiced in what would come to be known as Victory in Europe, or VE Day. Millions of Allied citizens took to the streets to celebrate the end of the Nazi threat and rejoice in the triumph of freedom and democracy. Of course, the war was not over. While Great Britain and the Allies in Europe could at last take a breath, the United States now stood alone against Imperial Japan in the Pacific. Though Japan was severely weakened, the soldiers of the Imperial Army, who were trained in the ancient ways of samurai warfare, would not stop until either they conquered the Allies or they themselves were conquered. Finally, the Americans were left with no choice except two destructive options. Either commission a second D-Day invasion of sorts, this time into Japan, and risk losing millions of young American soldiers, or option two, use a secret weapon to force Japan into surrender, the atomic bomb. Finally, on August 6, 1945, the Americans dropped one bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and on August 9th, they dropped a second on Nagasaki. The cost was devastating, and let me be clear, this was a tragedy. The total death toll numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and many who died were civilians. But let me also be clear that this was a necessary act to save millions more lives and to stop an evil empire. The bomb dropping forced Imperial Japan to surrender on August 14, 1945, in what would come to be known as Victory in Japan, or VJ Day. And at long last, World War II was over, and the free world was victorious. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History. Thanks for watching this video. For more content like this, make sure to check out some of the other videos we have on this channel.